thing I'd just say, I did work in the BBC archive for a long time. And also I was chair of Focal International, which is the Federation of Commercial Libraries and Archives. So I learned a lot from both the public sector side and the commercial side. And I've since retired, but I'm enjoying working as chair of the Board of Trustees for MACE, which is a great archive, particularly relevant for here, Media Archives of Central England, which Clare is the chief executive of, and will tell you much more. And also, as Justin said, I work with the British Entertainment History Project, which is full of over 800 now interviews with practitioners in film, television, radio and theatre, because people's careers crossed so often, you know. Now, the first thing I want to do is to thank John Franklin, if he's in the room. I think he's done an absolutely fantastic job pulling all this together from what was a vision that he had. And he goes around saying, and I'm only a film collector, but he has done an amazing amount of stuff. He's great. So I think we ought to give him a really big thank you for that. Thanks. I've got a nasty feeling he's not in the room. Or if he is, he's hiding his light under a bushel somewhere. No. Anyway, but a big thanks to John. Now, the panel here are really very much a panel of professional experts working in archives, media archives. And our theme here is Film is Fabulous. And it certainly is fabulous. And it's a really important part of our cultural heritage, reflecting important personalities, events, places, so many things, as well as just our cultural entertainment. And it's so important to us. Not everybody, I fear, always appreciates that. They just take it for granted in a way, but it certainly is fabulous. The other important thing, though, I'm starting to say, is that it's part of our heritage and our culture. And a lot of it was here before any of us were. And with a bit of luck, it'll be here when we've not here anymore. And so we're all of us, in whatever way we are, we're kind of custodians of this stuff. And we need to be able to preserve it, make sure it's safe and all the rest of it, so that future generations, future family members and so on can see it and learn, just have fun seeing things from the past. So it's so important that we understand, I think, that that is our role as sort of custodians as it passes through our hands, or we pass across the viewer to that. So our panel of experts here are going to tell us, first of all, something about the archives they come from. So you've got an idea of the sort of public archive world or scene that there is in the UK. And I was going to go in order of people on the programme. So for a quick intro, first of all, it's Clare Watson, Dr. Clare Watson from the MACE archive. So Clare, if you could just say a little bit about MACE, what it does and so on.
Sure.
Well, and if I could also just add your background as well, as like kind of why you're here.
Oh, I can spot in the audience the person who taught me about film archiving, Jane Alvey from East Anglian Film Archive. Sorry, Jane. But that's where my journey with film archiving began. As a student of archiving, unfortunately, that course isn't running now. So you have to go overseas to learn about the profession of film archiving. But yes, that's where I started as a film student, fascinated by the history of the moving image, and lucky enough to be at a university that had a course in film archiving, and there was just no other option for me. I just had to do it. I had fabulous teachers there, and then went on to do a PhD very much focused in film preservation and film archiving, and went on to teach film archiving alongside Jane, and then moved into actually managing film archive collections. So I was in London at the London Screen Archives for a while, which is the regional networked English regional film archive. And about 8 years ago, I came to the Midlands, where I took over from the long-standing director of that archive, James Patterson, as the new director of Media Archive for Central England. So that's my background. And just, did you want me to say a few words about MACE? Yeah. So Media Archive for Central England was there before I was there, obviously. There's a network of regional film archives in the UK, and I think probably a lot of you might be familiar with some of them. I don't know how far and wide people have travelled from, but we're so lucky in the UK because in 1976, a regional film archive movement was really born, or became more formalised, with the founding of the first regional film archive in East Anglia. And over the period of about 30 years, regional film archives developed across the whole of the UK. So there are now 9 English regional film archives that cover the whole of England, as well as the devolved nations regional national archives, and of course the BFI. And we work very much together and closely in a sort of informal yet coordinated fashion to make sure that we're doing our best to preserve screen heritage for our regions and making sure that that's accessible to the public. So that's what we do. That is what MACE does. And MACE was one of the younger regional archives. We weren't formed until 2000. We weren't operational really until 2000. And I just think that's incredible because we cover the East and West Midlands, so a huge swathe of the country, our remit. And to think that it was well over 100 years before we started to systematically think about collecting the screen heritage for this region. It's sort of unbelievable, really, when you think about it. So now we have a collection of about 100,000 items in the archive, and we collect things that are predominantly of significance to our region. So that might be stuff that has been made about the region, or it might be moving images that are connected to a significant individual of the region. But that's broadly our remit. And I like to think of the films and the content that we look after as a sort of social history of the region in all its moving image forms and glory, right from home movies, home videos, from I think the earliest film we have in the archive is in the 1898, so some professional films, and a huge collection of regional television from the ITV collection dating back to the 1950s. So we cross every possible type of moving image. And we continue to collect and grow the collection so that hopefully we have a collection that moves with the communities of the Midlands and is representative of everybody in it. And that's really our mission.
Thanks, Claire. I'll introduce our next two panelists, and then afterwards we'll talk about how they and or their archives can offer advice or guidance to anyone who's concerned about a collection that they might have or they might know about. But we're quite tight on time, so we're not going to have time for Q&As. This is a way really of introducing these people and their organizations, so you can get an idea of how they might be able to help in some way. And everybody here will be here for the rest of the day and more than willing to answer any questions or concerns or anything that anyone has. And I think maybe a one-to-one discussion would be much more focused on a specific case or collection than having it discussed in a wider audience like this, even though we don't really have the time for it anyway. So my next panelist is Steve Foxon from the BFI. So the same thing, Steve, a little bit about your background. What do you know? What's your specialism?
Hello.
And what can the BFI?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everybody. I'm Steve Foxon. I work for, as Sue says, I work for the BFI National Archive. I'm the curator of non-fiction, which largely has a remit of covering pretty much every type of film you can imagine except the feature films, really anything that's not professional actors. So I mean, my field really is we look after documentary, we look after newsreels, we look after, to some extent, amateur film, and advertising films forms a big part of my kind of day-to-day sort of work as well. Background, well, I I'm very fortunate. I wasn't allowed to do the course that you did, Claire, because David Cleveland wouldn't let me do it. He says there's nothing I can teach you, which is a very nice compliment when I was desperate to get signed up on a course. It didn't help me though, because I couldn't get on the course. I was very fortunate. I grew up in the film archive world. My dad, I think, is behind that bright white light on the back row. My dad ran the what we know as the.
Is your dad here?
He is. He's on the back row at the top there.
Okay,
he's also here. So most of you probably know Rob Foxon anyway, or a lot of you probably do. My dad runs an industry-facing archive, which was sort of loosely called the Railway Film Archive. He also has an incredible local history film archive as well, which you know about, Clare, already. So I kind of grew up with most of the older generation that are in this room. I grew up with you guys taking me to film fairs and selling films. So I kind of feel very at home, really. Ironically, I actually worked for the Phoenix, so I helped commission this building that we're in right now. So as a student, I was a projectionist in this very building, and the former Phoenix before this one, and I've bounced around from pretty much every film archive in the UK, really, except for the BBC. That's probably one of the few archives I've not worked for. So really, that's how I came into the BFI. I did a whole series of freelance years. I'm now back in the BFI since 2013, and film turns up every day. I mean, one of the things I liked about what you said at the beginning there, Sue, is that we're all day to day. Most people here interact anyway. We're all friends, and that's the thing I want to extend to those of you that don't know us. We are all friends. We are all happy to help. There's not really very much competitiveness between archives, and it's not really about where films might go in the future. It's about the fact that they are cared for and they have a future. The BFI gave up long ago on trying to be completist. We cannot possibly collect everything, and that's really where regional film archives come in. It's where television archives come in, because between us, we're all resourced to be able to house that sort of thing. So really, it's a terrible introduction that I'm giving myself, but come and say hello. Come and say hello. We're here all day.
That's lovely. Thanks very much. I think it would be great, for the future. And there's an element of this going on anyway, of collaboration and sharing between the different archives that there are. As you said, the regional film archives, the BFI, the BBC, Channel 4, ITV, etc. But I think there could be more collaboration going on and more sharing of professional standards, for example, catalogues and stuff like that. Sure. I know people who have a dream that there should be a national television archive catalogue. And it's there. It could be done. It's just, it isn't done at the moment. But I think it would be a good thing.
Steps in the right direction.
Yeah. And I have to confess to everyone, I kind of come from a television background, but I love the medium in general, because it's always very confusing. There's a lot of television on film and a lot of film on television. So, where's the line? Anyway, I'll stop babbling. So that would have been a nice intro for Steve. So thank you very much. Steve Roberts from the BBC archive, and also a guy with an amazing reputation for technical knowledge in terms of film transfers and looking after the hardware and the technology of our content. So thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Just a bit about you and BBC again. Thanks.
I'm Steve Roberts. I'm currently Principal Operations Engineer for BBC Archives, based in West London. As a child of the 60s, I grew up watching what is considered really, I think, to be the golden age of television, the 70s and into the 80s. And I was fascinated by television, absolutely loved it. And then when I was 11 years old, a little film called Star Wars came out, and I was absolutely at the right age to appreciate that. I was completely blown away by it. So I maintained an interest in film and television, right through to going to university, until I got to the point where I had to decide what job I wanted to do. And I really didn't know. And then I saw an advert for the BBC who were advertising for engineers down in Television Centre. So I applied for that, and I became an engineer in the television recording department. at Television Centre because of my interest in archive television. And actually, it's surprising how many people who work in television have no interest in television whatsoever. But I was one of the people who was interested in television and how it was made. And we were directly supporting program makers making those programs. But because I had an interest in the archive stuff, the stuff I grew up with, and also the earlier stuff that I'd only ever heard about, I segued towards the film side of things, and I became a telecine engineer, so looking after the machines that transferred film to video. And I went on to eventually become the BBC senior telecine engineer after many years. And also as a sort of sideline, because a lot of things in the BBC get done by people who do things outside of their normal jobs. I got very involved in restoration of archive television programs, particularly Doctor Who, and for anybody who can read my T-shirt, Quatermass. I looked after the restoration of the Quatermass serials, which was my absolute dream job in 2005 for the DVD release. All things the way they go, of course. The job eventually succumbed to redundancies, and in 2011 I left Television Centre and left post-production, freelanced a little bit, and ended up working for Archives, which is where I am now. And I'm part of a very small team of engineers, and unfortunately getting smaller all the time due to more redundancies, who we design and we build the systems that the BBC uses for digitising their archive materials. And that can be anything from photographic scanning, audio tape, videotape, and film. And for the last 15 years, we've had a massive project running to digitise the videotape archive. And we're just about completed that now. So we're now moving on to the film archive, which is one area which it's one of those things, because film is so timeless in the sense that it doesn't really decay very much if it's kept in the right conditions. So it's sort of been left on the back burner, but now we've got the opportunity to actually do that. And a lot of it is being led by the fact that now we have iPlayer and BBC4. We actually do have ins to get that archive material actually seen instead of just languishing in a vault, which I know is an absolute bugbear of a lot of film collectors. You know, why should I give you back this reel of film if it's never going to be seen again? And I am completely on side with that point of view, and I think it's something that is changing, and it'll only change for the better.
Can I just add to that for me, having come from the BBC archive, but many years ago now, Steve and I were having a quick chat before we came down, and Steve is very keen to get through to the people who are scheduling stuff, for want of a better word, scheduling stuff on iPlayer and things like that, to get them to start thinking about promoting finds and celebrating the fact that something has been found as a nice peg, really, for transmission. So wish you every good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, stuff comes back all the time, you know, and it's really important just to make those connections with film collectors. I mean, there have been some difficult, there's been animosity, I think, really, sometimes between certain collectors, and mistrust, and I think a lot of that is fair. I think the BBC in the past certainly hasn't been the best guardian of its own collection sometimes. A lot of that changed actually when Sue came along. Things got a lot better, but you know, hopefully we can get some good relationships going.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Yeah. Well, thank you all very much. You've got an idea now where they're coming from, why they know what they know, and how they might be able to offer guidance or help in any way. John's theme for this day was really to help secure the safety of film culture and heritage in the UK, particularly that which is being looked after by collectors and so on. And John's theme is we should be encouraging people to think about the unthinkable in a way, but you know, what happens to your collection in 10, 20, 30 years time? Big institutions don't have to think like that. They, with a bit of luck, they will go on forever. But one of the big things John was saying is for people to at least put some kind of codicil in their will to say what is so important about their collection, for example. And I'm sure John and others like Justin can give advice on this, but I was thinking it's making a note of why is that collection so important, and what do you want done with it, and possibly do you leave a little bit of money aside to do something with it? I don't know. That's a very personal thing. And then the other theme from John is make an inventory, make a list of some sort. We're all guilty of carrying around in our heads everything that needs to be known about anything, and not putting it down and not letting other people, like your children, your family, know exactly what something is. So we'd love to encourage people to think about or start working on making an inventory of what you've got. And that's where I think maybe Clare, as a professional archivist, could give a little bit of advice from MACE on that kind of listing or inventory. I can never say the word properly, that you could think about doing. And I know Richard, who's down here in the third from the front row, has done some work on that kind of thing anyway, and is very good as a second in command at MACE. So Claire, if you could just talk a little bit about what you could do in terms of advising people on listing, and perhaps a little bit of what MACE would do if they were offered a collection. What is your sort of protocol?
Okay, sure. I mean, I should start by saying it's a very individual thing for somebody to want or decide to put their collection into an archive. And it may be that an archive like MACE is a fit for your collection, or it isn't, or it is in part, or you have very different ideas about what happens to elements of your collection going forward. So we would always, talk to any inquirer at the archive on a very individual basis. We have a table upstairs, and you can come and talk to us all day, and we can give you information and pointers and guidance if that is appropriate for you. And very happy to do that. Normally, if we are contacted by an individual, we're a very small team. So it's a very one-to-one relationship. When you come to a regional film archive, there's only 7 of us. And Richard, who has been mentioned and who is here today, deals with a lot of the work to help bring collections into the archive. So he's an ideal person to have a chat with today. We would speak to you about your collection, try to understand a little bit about what's in it. It may be that actually, because I think Steve hit the nail on the head earlier by saying that we know that we can't collect everything. And it's the reason that we have a collecting policy and a defined remit. Although I said it was it's quite wide and flexible, we collect things to do with the Midlands. In fact, we're not able to take in everything, and it might not be appropriate in the right place for your collection to exist, if you're interested in that collection having a life of access in a way beyond being preserved. So I mentioned about the other regional film archives, for instance. Of course, there are lots of different types of archives that exist in the UK, and they're not all public. But if a collector comes to us, or an individual comes to us, and that collection isn't the right fit for MACE or for you, then one thing we can do is absolutely point you in the right direction of where it might be the right fit. And that's part of the role that regional film archives certainly play. We will be in contact with one another. We can help liaise between each other and point you to the right place. So that's certainly something.
There is a home for almost everything, isn't there? There
is. And the more you delve into it, there's an organisation that used to be called the BUFVC, and it's now called Learning on Screen. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I always thought fascinating that they published was a publication which I think you can go on and you can actually access in digital form now, but it was essentially a directory of all the film archives and repositories everywhere. And it is astounding how many repositories and types of archives there are. So you could check that out. But if you want some friendly one-to-one advice, then we're probably a good starting point if you're in the Midlands. Or you could, for instance, there is a public regional archives network called Film Archives UK, which has a website, Film Archives UK, filmarchives.org.uk. And all of those regional film archives I've mentioned are listed on there with contact details for all of those archives. So another sort of easy route in to find which archive might be appropriate for you. But yeah, that's the first point, would just be a conversation and understanding what you need and how we might be able to help you.
And you were saying about you've got a table upstairs, and is the guidelines on doing an inventory there as a document?
Yeah, so obviously because of the initiative that John Franklin has come up with, particularly looking about at the future for private collections, and if there's anything we can do to be a part to help with thinking about that. One of his key ideas is to help people to think about inventorizing, and probably you already have lists of stuff, and maybe in part or in whole, or maybe not at all. So what we've done is brought along some examples today to think about how you could sort of simply list out a collection that might make that a little bit of a help in getting it to the right place, if that's what you're looking to do. So come and talk to us, and we can talk to you about that.
Great. Technology. Thank you very much for that. By the way, you might have noticed John Clancy creeping in earlier. He's brought a clock down here for us. So
it's all I can look at.
So we know what time it is. Although the hands don't seem to be moving. But don't worry, John. Thanks. So Steve Foxton, what about the BFI? What's their role in this? In terms of giving advice to people who are worried, maybe, or even the families of a collector who are worried about what to do with it.
Sure.
How do they know how I don't mean when I use the word value, how financially valuable it is, how cultural, heritagely valuable it is.
Sure. I mean, the BFI's position is very similar to Claire, yeah, what she said. The BFI's position is very, very similar, really. I mean, we're very happy to encourage collecting. We're very happy to encourage passing collections on. We're equally happy to encourage the deep research that we support to go with all of that. So I mean, if somebody has a collection, I would want to say that we are extremely approachable. Go to the web. I mean, Google's fantastic now. You say technology. Google's fantastic, isn't it? You can't struggle to find the BFI on Google. The Curatorial Archivists team has a curatorial inquiries page within the BFI website. I would suggest to have a read. There will be guidelines already on there, but don't just sit and be a reader. Make contact. Let's have those conversations. I mean, it is very similar advice. Claire's already kind of really hit the button with it all. Really, we have a collecting policy. We have a slightly different remit to Claire's and to Steve's here as well. But as I've said before, there is a home for everything.
Could I just ask, what is the BFI's remit?
The BFI's remit is to collect, preserve, and make forever available the greatest in British film.
Wonderful. Thank you. Pretty good. So carry on. Sorry. Carry on.
Sorry. We used to have a slogan over the door that was "Film Forever," and I loved the slogan. Unfortunately, the building's been remodeled, so we don't have the slogan up anymore. But I mean, it's really interesting, and I can tell from the people I've spoken to already today that there's a definite split in the audience between those that are interested in content and those that are interested in film as a medium, and we kind of all 3 or 4 of us on here have that deep love for the medium, for the actual physical film, and it's not just the film itself, it's the tech, it's the kit, it's the projectors. There's some incredible equipment on display upstairs at the minute, and so there is this deep love of content as well as kit, which kind of makes us prime place to have those conversations and to feel at home sharing, you know, what we love. I mean, it's what we do, isn't it? It's what we do. So it is a love. I don't know anybody. Interesting, you were saying there are people in the television industry that don't love television. I've never come across that, you know, in film archiving. Everybody I've ever met, and I can see some colleagues in the audience as well, I'm sure they would say the same, that everybody has that deep kind of rooted love of the medium. So yeah, just pick up the phone, drop me an email, look me up.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, when you're just mentioning the tech as well, I mean, in film, on the one hand, we all used to think film is forever when compared with videotape, which we all know there have been generations of different formats in videotape that are very short-lived. And I can remember one engineer telling me, you know, that the tape will be obsolete by the time you finish running it. And but film we always thought of as permanent, but it isn't always. I mean, there's I don't know how much nitrate there is about the place where that has the
It still turns up. It still
does.
turns up. You're finding that as well?
Occasionally, yeah.
Fantastic.
Sometimes people send it through the post in jiffy bags, and we send it back to them in very large metal cans.
I've had people travel across the London Underground and drop it in at reception, not realizing. Yeah. Nitrate still turns up. Of course it does. I've had people deliver a bag of powder to me and asked me if they can get the pictures off it still. And I mean, I blame
Morecambe and Wise.
That's nitrate at its worst decomposition. That is when it's just a bag of dust. And I mean, unfortunately, that's when it's at its most explosive as well. But I mean, generally, I mean, you talk about formats. We still try to preserve on the medium that the images were made on in the first place. So I mean, if we're presented with a 35mm film, we will try where budget is available to preserve that on 35mm negative. We will always make digital, you know, copies at the time, but I mean that's the thing about spreading across the mediums. I know as time moves on, film and, you know, is going to be less and less used. But it already feels like, you know, collectively this community is the last bastion of that anyway. So, I mean, let's keep film forever.
I mean, I think from our point of view, the point about technology going on is a good one, because from the BBC's point of view, technology has got so good now in terms of film scanning that we can actually fairly well capture the entirety of what is available within a piece of film digitally now for the future. And so that is what we tend to do. No longer are we really trying to acquire the physical film back from a collector who might want to loan us his collection or part of the collection, whatever. We will just borrow the film, scan it, make an archival copy, make some kind of file copy or DVD to give back to the collector along with their film. So, you know, we're not in the business of having to try to acquire the physical film anymore, like we were back in the old days, where we would get a film back and, you know, a 16mm print, and we would make you know, a dupe neg from it, for example. No, I mean, for no other reason really than actually it's quite difficult to find somebody who'll make you a dupe neg these days.
Of course, yeah.
And what about the BBC's own stuff that they're transferring for, as we know, access purposes? The BBC is subject to all sorts of rumours and so on. Some are true, some are not. An awful lot are not. But I know, like in terms of film, the film technology, there would often be the cut neg, the answer print that came from that in the old days was kept as a viewing copy, and then there'd be maybe the transmission copy. So you can see some of those elements are redundant now. Would the BBC be keeping them?
No, we are still keeping them. Yeah, we have two film vaults. We're just moving out of our archive centre, our purpose-built archive centre at Perivale, for reasons which are sad and I won't bore you with. But essentially, we are maintaining our Film Masters archive at Perivale, which is negatives, single copies, anything that is very, very important. And that's a vault which is kept at 5 degrees centigrade and 30% humidity. But the rest of our permanent library has had to go into commercial storage, and it's now in Sittingbourne in Kent with a company called Restore, who I'm sure will look after it just as well as we've looked after it. But it's a bit sad for it not to be on our doorstep anymore. But to go back to the point is that we're not throwing things away. If we want to rebroadcast a programme, we have the option to go back right to the original camera negatives if we need to. For instance, we recently did a restoration of Stonewall from 35mm. Annoyingly, it wasn't the version that got transmitted due to some red tape issues, but I hope it might end up going onto iPlayer at least. But we definitely, have the facilities and the drive to do that. Really, we all want to preserve the best possible copy of what we've got. Really.
Yeah, no, thanks. I can remember in the old days, just when the archive was still in Windmill Road, there used to be a great big crate. No, it wouldn't be a crate. Great big box of sand that, in case anything on nitrate came through, it went straight in there. In case it sort of self.
Shall I tell you quickly my nitrate story?
Yeah.
I was once on
I think these might be legitimate warnings to people.
Yes. This is a legitimate
case.
warning. Yeah. So I was on a fire warden's training course at the BBC, and it was an absolutely blazing hot summer's day, and the fire officer showed us this film of 2,000 foot of 35mm flaky nitrate in a concrete bunker, and they set fire to it, and it blew the top of the bunker off. Over his shoulder, through the window in the car park, I could see my car in the blazing sunshine with 3,000 foot of nitrate on the front passenger seat. I didn't tell him. There was nothing wrong with it. It was good nitrate, but it's just...
No, it's right. And for those that want to know, it smells strongly of almonds. So if you got that whiff coming out of the cupboard, then be warned. Yeah. Oh dear, I've switched myself off now. Sorry, I'm just thinking, Steve, is the BBC opening up its stuff more?
Yes, I mean,
I know we talked about donations and things.
Yes, we're very open. One of my slight bugbears with archives is there isn't a single point of contact for people to come along and say, look, I've got this and I'd like to give back, or I'd like to talk to you about this. People can always talk to me, steve.roberts@bbc.co.uk. So we are actively bringing things in all the time. As you probably saw from the bump that accompanied this event, three programs were recently recovered as part of this initiative, and we transferred 4 programs just the other day, and the 4th one will be revealed in the next session, I believe.
Oh, right, really?
Yeah, but it's one that certainly interested me, and as a child of the 60s and 70s and children's television, it was one that I was very happy to see again.
Oh, okay. Hang on, Stuart's. Oh, where are we? Stuart's kneeling at my feet here, waving.
He's telling you there's 5 minutes left.
Oh, really? The clock's slow.
Sue, I might make a distinction about the collecting here, because MACE, as a regional film archive, is not the producer of the stuff, and there's a distinction between what the BBC obviously hold and the types of things you hold, and your answer prints and all of that.
And we only hold the BBC produced stuff.
Exactly. And I suppose we're slightly more similar to the BFI in the sense that we're collecting stuff that has been made by others, and so if you do have, all 3 of us represent some sort of different sphere of production and making as well. And Steve Foxon was saying that the BFI collect things of national significance. We would say we collect things of regional significance, and it's important to think about that, because you might have a collection that crosses all of those areas. You may have things that are to do with the production of the BBC, and you may have something to do with professional feature film production, and you might have something that you may have even shot yourself of your region. And so none of us would take all of that stuff, which is really important to understand. And so if you're thinking about that, and that is somewhere where you would like your legacy or the things that you've collected, and you're thinking about that, then you come and talk to us, and we can help. That, you know, the way that we've spoken about how we collaborate, speak to one another, know one another, you know, we can help with that. If you have those sorts of collections where your passion has gone across all of those spheres, including making your own material, you know, MACE and other regional archives really want to see that. You know, we want to see life on film in our regions, however that's been produced. So I just wanted to add that.
No, thanks. Am I? Yeah. Thanks very much for that, Claire. And in a way, the point of this panel was to show you what, or open up a bit, I suppose, what expertise there is, what possibilities there are to gain advice and things. If you do go back and smell almonds coming out of the kitchen, it might not be, you know, the Christmas cake. It might be a nasty can of something. So Claire has talked a lot about their collecting policies, and so Steve F, if I can say that. And obviously Steve Roberts is very focused on its BBC output. But the other line to come from here is that they're here to offer help and assistance and guidance from that list for inventory information to where's the best place for me to go to this, if I've got this kind of technical problem, or I've got a collection, where's a good place for me to go to. So on that note, I'd like to thank all of you very much for being here and being prepared to answer people's questions throughout the day. So don't hesitate. If you've got any queries or any startling information or experience you want to share, then, well, and I'll include myself for what use I might be, but they're all here. So thank you all very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks, Sue.
Oh, no.